Hello everyone, this is PKO Entertainment and we are back again, and here we have another video for you, and this will be another review in the Unrated Underappreciated movie review series, and in this edition I'll focus on Guy Ritchie's most recent effort, The Wrath of Man. Released in April the 22nd, 2021, it stars Jason Statham, Holt McCallany, Josh Hartnett, Scott Eastwood and Jeffrey Donovan, and of course was directed by Guy Ritchie. It was also confirmed as a remake of the 2004 French thriller Cash Truck. Now the setup within Wrath of Man is that we start with the robbery of an armoured cash truck, of which several guards and civilians are brutally shot and killed. 5 months later, we see a man named Patrick Hill applying for a job within a cash security firm known as Fortico. After barely passing the various tests and assessments, it steadily becomes clearer that Hill, or Mr. H as he is often referred to throughout this film, is vastly superior to his colleagues in terms of his skill set, weapon use and tactical strategy. After taking out efficiently a group of robbers assaulting a cash truck, Hill quickly ascends through the ranks, which draws attentions both from his colleagues and also the FBI as well. Over the course of the story, the security staff starts to question H's true nature and whether he's actually more of a threat than a help to them. Eventually we find out the true intentions of Mr. H and the motivations, and that he will go to whatever lengths necessary to achieve his ultimate goal. Now Wrath of Man somewhat represents a major change in style and tone from Guy Ritchie, who has very much been defined by his run of British gangster dramas ever since coming to prominence through Lock, Stock, Smoking Barrels. His movies are consistently full of quick edits, jumping back and forth within the overall narrative, and they overall have very much of a comic, breezy, crowd-pleasing tone about them. Now I've always felt that this tone tends to undercut his films from any real genuine threat or tension. They tend to become far more of a gimmick, almost of a self-parody, very similar to what we see a lot in Quentin Tarantino's films. And ultimately I think this finds them very frustrating to watch overall as complete stories. So what makes Wrath of Man such a good film is that Guy Ritchie tends to tone down a lot of his normal habits, and as a result we get far more of a superior movie. Wrath of Man is very much more of a lean, efficient, exciting thriller, far more serious, full of more purpose and figure. Now this time we do have a Guy Ritchie film that does leave a lasting impression and impact. This time there is a sense of escalation, jeopardy and peril that isn't undercut by juvenile or comic antics. Guy Ritchie keeps this film very much straight and direct as to his previous work, and overall the film itself is better off for it. Yes, we do get the typical Tarantino-esque chapter titles, I think there's 4 overall, and yes, we do get a certain flashback narrative, but this time the narrative is done to serve the story, and the film does spend a good amount of time establishing motivations of characters, and this time Guy Ritchie manages to keep you immersed into the story rather than distracting you from it. The action sequences are well staged and are very coherent. There's no shaky charm or over editing, and everything is expertly shot, and there remains a sharp intensity throughout the action sequences. I also credit the musical score from Chris Burstead, who also scored Guy Ritchie's previous effort, The Gentleman, and the music does such a great job to really carry the scenes, building up all of the atmosphere and suspense throughout. So even though we have lengthy scenes of dialogue where nothing is particularly happening, it does well just to keep you involved and keep you compelled to the overall story. Now in the lead role, Jason Statham is fine. To be honest, he's more portraying his own screen personality rather than an actual fully realised character. Now, to be fair to him, he's not really given anything in terms of a range to exhibit any charisma or personality. This is very much more of a straight down the line, stoic, very deadly character that we are seeing in Mr. H. But once again, I think Statham has enough in terms of his own presence to keep you hooked into the character. And yes, we do get certain twists and turns as what we typically get with Guy Ritchie's movies, but I do have to say, as the story progressed, I was constantly on the edge of my seat. It did keep me guessing, but in a more positive way, as to how exactly the story turns out. And yes, I was certainly questioning who exactly is telling the truth, who exactly will double cross one another, and there is a certain mystery element to this film as well, and like I said, that keeps it overall very exciting and engaging. And it's always a good merit for any film that gets more interesting and more tense as the story progresses. So if I had to give a score for The Wrath of Man, I would give it a 7.1 out of 10. As I mentioned before, Guy Ritchie drops his normal conventions and habits for a far more terse, purposeful, compelling and exciting thriller that really does keep you engaged all the way through, and I think it's a very good entry within his overall filmography, and for me personally it actually turns out to be overall one of his best movies. So when we go on to the overall release of The Wrath of Man, on a budget of 40 million, it managed to gross over 104 million worldwide. So on the one hand, it did manage to make its budget back, But in terms of a critical and public perception, many people felt it was actually one of Guy Ritchie's more disappointing entries within his career because it didn't have the typical comic caricatures and typical gangster humour that what we see in his previous films. Now, me personally, I think this served the film better, but I think on its release, many people felt that this was much more of a functional and more lifeless and humourless thriller. Many people felt there wasn't really a lot of personality or life within all of the performances within the supporting characters, but as I mentioned before, I think this was to the film's benefit, as I think it kept the overall story very tense and compelling throughout. And for me, when assessing Guy Ritchie's career, The Wrath of Man is actually a direction I would like to see the director stay on. I think he would benefit in trying to make his films far more purposeful and far more impressionable, adding a lot more tension and excitement. As I mentioned before, when he tries to stick to his normal style of directing, whilst they can be crowd-pleasing efforts overall, I didn't mind The Gentleman, but at the same time, if every potential situation is being undercut by a one-liner or a caricature of a certain character, it makes the story far less compelling and far less interesting to watch. So hopefully he will stay on this next trajectory, but much like Tarantino with the underperformance of Jackie Brown, I do have a fear that Guy Ritchie will kind of revert back to type, and that will be a very disappointing outcome overall in my own personal opinion. So that's my thoughts and feelings and review of The Wrath of Man, released in 2021. Very much a film that I believe is both underrated and underappreciated as well. But if you have the same feelings as me, let me know what you think in the comments below. How do you think it compares to his previous work? Do you think it's superior? Or do you want to indeed see Guy Ritchie take a step back to his tried and trusted formula, as you find that more crowd pleasing and entertaining? If there are any other Guy Ritchie films that you'd like to see me review on this channel, or any other film of yours that you'd like to see me cover, then let me know in the comments and I will provide commentary for those movies as well. Please also hit and like the subscription and notification buttons so I can provide you with more high quality content like this in the future. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves, stay at safe distances, and I will see you very, very soon.